Have you ever thought about what is the most important thing in your frame? Chances are you probably have. And I bet as well, you took a photo that you thought would be good, and then when you looked back at it on your camera, it didn't look good at all. Now this comes down to the visual hierarchy of your photograph. As a photographer, to make an effective image, you want to structure it in such a way that the things that you see as important are also seen by the viewer as important. And there are a handful of things that will help or hinder any object in your photograph. Frank Capra once said, if your photos aren't good enough, you're not close enough. And what he's talking about here is scale. Scale really matters, and our brains assign a higher level of importance to things that are bigger than others. This is probably an evolutionary trait learned over thousands of years, as the biggest saber-toothed tiger was the one that you had to pay most attention to, and probably the one that would have eaten you. Now in photography, it's not that drastic, but it still plays an important role. If I take a photograph like this, the stream is part of the shot, but it doesn't have much of an importance. However, if I take a shot like this at the same location, that stream takes up a lot more space in the frame, and this moves the stream up the hierarchical ladder. Here's another example. These are the Anglesey Barracks at Athey in Snowdonia. If I use the branches to create an out of focus frame, they're part of the photograph, but they don't hold much importance. Whereas if I shoot a wider shot and get the trunks and branches in the frame, they become more dominant and go up the hierarchical ladder. So if the thing that you want to be most important in your frame isn't, you might need to move away from other things, exclude them completely from your frame, or move towards that subject and make it much bigger in your frame. And this will give it a higher level of importance. Another tool to give an object in your photograph more or less importance is color. Look at this image and have a think about what is important. To me, it's the green of the ferns. The color draws my eye to that part of the frame. However, if I just change that around a little bit and then show you this, what is the most important part of the frame now? I'd say it's the rusty metalwork in the building. And then if I take out all of the color completely, it changes the dynamic of the photograph completely. This shows how important colors are in your photographs. Look at this next photo. The castle is yellow and the clouds have a bluish tint to them. Even though you might think there can be only one, the castle is using the two principles I've just mentioned, and also the fifth idea as well. Contrast is another tool that you can use to create that visual importance. If you're not sure how to use contrast, there is a way that you can have a look at your shot straight away to see how good or bad the contrast is. And that's switching your camera to black and white or dropping the saturation right down in Lightroom or whatever program you use. After all, what is contrast? Well, it's basically the difference between the darkest and the brightest parts of your photograph. So you can really hone in on it when that image is just black and white. In this photograph, the sunlight is just hitting the staircase. With the color on, it looks good, but it's distracting. To see how the contrast is affecting this image, if I switch it to black and white, you can really see that that staircase pops out. And this shows that the contrast has added to the importance of that part of the photograph. With this silhouette, your eye is drawn to the outline of the surfer, and silhouettes are a great example of using contrast to emphasize something in your frame. If you look at this photograph, there is one thing that you can see no matter where you look in the frame. The moon. It just dominates the shot, and wherever I look in the frame, my eye just wants to go to the moon. And let's face it, who doesn't want to go to the moon? The alignment of objects in your photograph is really important. They will help your viewer's eye take a journey around that frame. This could be where you take a part of the scene and place it in front of something else, from getting a path, a road, or lines in the foreground and using them to lead your viewer's eye to what is important. A lot of the time, those lines might be bigger than the subject itself, but they're not the most important thing. However, they play a really important role in your photograph, and it would probably be a lot less dramatic without them. With the river in this shot, it takes up a lot of room, but just leads your eye to the mountains. With this shot, the wooden bridge is very dominant, but again it leads your eye into the frame to the trees, the light, and the Milky Way. When it comes to visual hierarchy, there are certain objects that just demand your attention, whether you like it or not. And these are people and man-made objects. They just seem to jump out of the shot, no matter how small they are in the frame. So if you look at this photograph, your eye will inevitably be drawn to the person. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. This is again because of that evolutionary trait where we're looking for people in the scene around us. The survival parts of our brains draw our attention to that person so we can work out whether we want to kill them or shake their hands. Nowadays, in most parts of the world, it's not like that, but this is where that comes from. You can also place a small building in the frame, and once again, it'll grab your viewer's eye. When it comes to landscapes, if you're photographing one that has no human elements in it whatsoever, it can look remote and rugged. Whereas if there's a tiniest hint of human activity, the viewer's eye is inevitably drawn to that thing once again. It's amazing how this happens, and it's amazing how small that building or person can be in your frame. And in knowing this, you can use it to your advantage in your photography. The key is to use these in conjunction with each other to build the hierarchy in your photograph, so the viewer knows what is important, but also what is not important. So the next time you take a shot, think about what's the most important thing in your photograph. If your eye isn't drawn to it, or things aren't pointing towards that thing, then maybe you need to rearrange the hierarchy of that shot with these things that I've mentioned. This summer, I'm actually doing a series where I break down each part of composition in detail. If you're watching this in the future, I'll link it here. And if not, make sure you subscribed and click the bell so you don't miss out. I'll see you next time.